Kevin Rivers stepped off the transport shuttle and onto the polished metal floors of New Geneva Station. The massive space station floated in the darkness between stars, its bright lights making it look like a small city in space. Kevin had been to many places in the galaxy, but this station always amazed him. It was home to the richest and most powerful beings from hundreds of different worlds. He walked slowly through the main corridor, watching the crowd around him. Tall blue aliens, with skin like crystal, moved past him, their expensive robes flowing behind them. These were the Zephyrians, known throughout the galaxy for their love of beauty and art. Near the food courts, he saw groups of Valorians talking loudly about business deals. The Valorians had 4 arms each and liked to wave them around when they spoke. Their golden jewelry caught the light as they moved. Kevin looked very different from these wealthy aliens. He wore simple brown pants and a plain white shirt. His black hair was a bit messy, and his old leather jacket had seen better days. Most people would think he was just another poor human trying to fit in with the rich crowd. That was exactly how Kevin liked it. He checked the small piece of paper in his pocket. The address was written in neat handwriting. Stellar Elegance, Level 47, Sector 12. Kevin had an important meeting later that day, and he needed to look his best. The problem was that his usual barber on Earth was very far away, and he had heard that Stellar Elegance was the best grooming salon in this part of the galaxy. The elevator ride to level 47 took several minutes. Kevin shared the space with a group of Corvanian merchants who were discussing the price of rare metals. The Corvanians looked like large bears that walked on 2 legs, but they wore expensive suits and carried briefcases full of credits. They glanced at Kevin once and then ignored him completely. When the elevator doors opened, Kevin found himself in front of the most beautiful salon he had ever seen. The walls were made of some kind of white stone that seemed to glow from within. Soft music played in the background and the air smelled like expensive perfume. Through the large windows, he could see the stars and other ships moving past the station. Kevin walked through the glass doors and into the main area of Stellar Elegance. The inside was even more impressive than the outside. The floors were covered with soft carpets that felt like walking on clouds. Beautiful plants from different worlds grew in large pots around the room. The ceiling was very high, and thousands of tiny lights hung down like stars. Several aliens were already inside, sitting in comfortable chairs while staff members worked on their hair, nails, and skin. Kevin saw a Zephyrian woman getting her crystal-like hair polished until it shone like diamonds. A Valorian businessman was having all 4 of his hands worked on at the same time by different staff members. Everyone looked very rich and very important. Kevin walked up to the front desk where a tall Zephyrian male stood behind a computer screen. The alien had pale blue skin and silver hair that moved like water when he turned his head. His name tag said, Zexathala, Manager. He was wearing a black suit that probably cost more than most people made in a year. "Excuse me," Kevin said politely. "I would like to get a haircut and maybe a shave. Do you have any time available today?" Zexathala looked down at Kevin with cold eyes. He took his time studying Kevin's simple clothes and messy appearance. His nose wrinkled slightly as if Kevin smelled bad. "This is Stellar Elegance," he said slowly, as if Kevin might not understand. "We serve only the most important clients in the galaxy." "I understand," Kevin replied calmly. "I can pay whatever the cost is." Zexathala seemed surprised that Kevin could afford their services. He looked Kevin up and down again, clearly not believing that this simple human had enough. "Credits. Our basic package starts at 500 galactic credits," he said, expecting Kevin to walk away. Kevin reached into his jacket and pulled out a small card. It was his credit account, and it had much more than 500 credits on it. Held it out to Zexathala without saying anything. The manager took the card and ran it through his computer. His eyes went wide when he saw the account balance, but he quickly hid his surprise. Kevin clearly had enough money, but Zexathala still did not think he belonged in their salon. "Very well," Zexathala said with a fake smile. "We can fit you in. Please follow me." He led Kevin through the main area of the salon, past all the important clients and their expensive treatments. Kevin could feel eyes watching him as he walked. Some of the aliens whispered to each other. probably wondering what a human was doing in such a fancy place. Zexthala brought Kevin to a chair in the back corner of the salon, far away from the windows and the nice view of space. It was the worst seat in the whole place, tucked behind a large plant where most people would not notice it. The chair was older than the others, and not as comfortable. "Wait here," Zexthala said. "Someone will be with you soon." Kevin sat down in the chair and looked around. He could see the other clients getting excellent service from multiple staff members. They were given drinks and snacks while they waited. Beautiful music played near their chairs, and they had perfect views of the stars outside. In his corner, Kevin had none of these things. The music was harder to hear, and he could barely see the windows. No one offered him anything to drink. He did not complain, though. He just sat quietly and waited, watching the busy salon around him. After about 20 minutes, a young Valorian with 4 thin arms came over to Kevin's chair. He looked nervous and kept glancing back toward the front of the salon where Zexthala was watching. The Valorian's name tag said Quindaros, Junior Stylist. "Hello," Quindaros said quickly. "I am here to cut your hair. We are very busy today, so we need to hurry." Kevin smiled at the young alien. "That's fine. Take your time, and do your best work." Quindaro seemed surprised by Kevin's kindness. Most of the clients in Stellar Elegance were demanding and rude to the staff, but he had been told to give this human the cheapest, fastest service possible, so he did not have time to think about. As Quindaros began to work, Kevin closed his eyes and tried to relax. He had an important job to do later, and he needed to stay calm and focused. He did not know that his quiet patience was about to be tested in ways he had never expected. Quindaros worked quickly on Kevin's hair, but it was clear he was not paying much attention to what he was doing. The young Valorian kept looking over at Zexthala, who was watching from across the salon. Every few minutes, the manager would make a gesture with his hand, reminding Quindaros to hurry up and not waste too much time on the human. Kevin noticed that Quindaros was using a different bottle of hair treatment than what he had seen the other stylists use. The liquid was a dull gray color instead of the bright blue that the other clients were getting. When Quindaros started to pour it on his hair, Kevin could smell that something was wrong. "Excuse me," Kevin said politely. "I think there might be a mistake with the hair treatment you're using." Quindaros stopped pouring and looked at the bottle in his hand. For a moment, his 4 eyes went wide as he realized what he had done. He had grabbed the wrong bottle from the shelf. The gray liquid was meant for Corvanian fur, not human hair. It would make Kevin's hair feel rough and look dull for weeks. But then Quindaros looked back at Zexthala, who was still watching him with cold eyes. The manager had made it very clear that Kevin was not an important client. Quindaros was afraid of getting in trouble for taking too much time or using expensive products on a human. "No mistake," Quindaros said loudly, making sure other people in the salon could hear him. "This is the right treatment for human hair. All human hair is the same anyway. You people are not complicated like the other species." Several aliens, sitting nearby, turned to look at what was happening. A large Corvanian businessman in an expensive suit started to chuckle. "That's right," he said in a deep voice. "Humans are very simple creatures. They don't need the same quality treatments as the rest of us." Kevin remained calm, but he tried again to explain. "I understand you're busy, but I think this treatment is meant for a different type of hair. If you could just check the label." "Are you telling me how to do my job?" Quindaros interrupted, his voice getting louder. "I have been working in salons for 15 years. I know what I'm doing. Just because you're human doesn't mean you know better than a trained professional." The Corvanian businessman stood up from his chair and walked over to where Kevin was sitting. He was much taller than Kevin and had thick brown fur covering his arms and face. His small black eyes looked down at Kevin with amusement. "Listen to this," the Corvanian said to the other clients. "The human thinks he knows more about hair care than someone who went to school for it. This is exactly what's wrong with your species. You think you're equal to everyone else just because you got lucky and found some old technology floating in space." More aliens started to gather around Kevin's chair. A group of Zephyrian women stopped their conversations to watch the show. They whispered to each other in their musical language, and Kevin could tell they were not saying nice things about him. "What's your name, human?" the Corvanian asked Kevin. Kevin Rivers, Kevin replied quietly. Well, Kevin Rivers, the Corvanian said. My name is Thekmore, and I own 17 mining companies across the galaxy. I have met thousands of humans in my business dealings, and I can tell you one thing for certain. Your people are nothing special. You're just jumped-up primitives who got lucky with some outdated technology. The other aliens in the salon started to laugh and nod their heads in agreement. A Valorian woman with expensive jewelry on all four arms spoke up from across the room. Humans always think they belong everywhere, she said. They show up on our worlds, in our businesses, in our social clubs. But look at them. They're so plain and boring. No beautiful skin like the Zephyrians, no multiple arms like us Valorians, no strength like the Corvanians. They're just ordinary. Very ordinary, agreed a tall Altarian male with silver skin and long white hair. I heard that on their home world, they still fight wars with each other. How primitive is that? Most civilized species stopped fighting centuries ago. Quindaros was enjoying the attention he was getting from the important clients. He had never had so many wealthy aliens listening to him before. He decided to continue the show. You know what the funny thing is? Quindaros said as he continued, to put the wrong treatment on Kevin's hair. This human probably saved up credits for months just to come here once. Look at his clothes. Look at his old jacket. He probably lives in some tiny apartment on a human colony world and dreams of being like us. The laughter in the salon got louder. Even some of the staff members started to smile and shake their heads. Kevin could feel all their eyes on him, but he did not get angry or fight back. He just sat quietly in his chair and waited for Quindaros to finish. Zexathala walked over to join the group around Kevin's chair. He had been watching from a distance, but now he wanted to be part of the fun. You know, he said to the crowd, we usually don't allow humans in stellar elegance. We have standards to maintain. But his credits were good, so we made an exception this one time. How generous of you, Thekmore said with a big smile. Though I'm not sure why any human would need expensive grooming. It's not like anyone important is going to notice them anyway. A Zephyrian woman with crystal blue hair joined the conversation. I heard that humans smell different from other species. Something about their primitive biology, is that true? Oh yes, Quindaros said, pretending to be an expert. Human hair and skin are much more basic than ours. They don't need the same level of care because they're not capable of appreciating fine things anyway. Kevin listened to all of this without saying a word. His face remained calm and peaceful, even as the aliens around him continued to insult his entire species. Some of them started to tell stories about other humans they had met, making fun of human customs and behavior. The worst part was that other clients in the salon began to join in, even if they had been minding their own business before. It seemed that making fun of the human had become the entertainment for the entire salon. Quindaros finally finished with Kevin's hair, which now looked dull and felt rough from the wrong treatment. He spun the chair around so Kevin could see himself in the mirror. There you go, he said with a fake smile. Perfect for a human. Kevin looked at his reflection and saw that his hair looked much worse than when he had arrived. But he did not complain or ask for the treatment to be fixed. He simply nodded and said, "Thank you." This quiet response seemed to make the aliens even more amused. "Look at that," Thekmore said. "He doesn't even know his hair looks terrible. Typical human." Kevin remained in his chair, surrounded by laughing aliens waiting patiently for whatever would happen next. The laughter in the salon was getting louder when the glass doors suddenly opened with a sharp sound. Everyone turned to look at who was coming in. 3 humans in dark blue uniforms walked into stellar elegance, and the mood in the room changed. Instantly. The woman leading the group was tall and had short brown hair. Her uniform was covered with medals and badges that showed she held a very high rank. Her name tag read, Commander L. Carter, Human Space Corps. Behind her walked 2 younger humans, a man and a woman, both wearing the same type of uniform, but with fewer medals. Commander Carter's eyes moved quickly around the salon, looking at all the aliens who had been laughing just moments before. Now they were all quiet, staring at the 3 humans who had just entered. The commander's face was serious and she looked worried about something. "Excuse me." Commander Carter said to Zexathala, who was still standing near Kevin's chair. I'm looking for someone very important. He was supposed to be at a meeting 30 minutes ago, but he never arrived. We've been searching the entire station for him. Zexathala straightened his suit and tried to look professional. He was not used to dealing with military people, especially human military people. This is a private salon, he said nervously. We only serve wealthy clients. I don't think the person you're looking for would be here. Commander Carter ignored his comment and continued to scan the room. Her eyes moved from one alien face to another, clearly searching for someone specific. The two junior officers behind her stood at attention, waiting for orders. The person we're looking for is a human male, Commander Carter explained. About 45 years old, black hair, probably wearing simple clothes. He has a very important job to do today, and the entire galaxy is waiting for him. Some of the aliens in the salon started to whisper to each other. They wondered what kind of human could be so important that military officers were searching for him. Most of them had never seen human soldiers before, and they were surprised by how professional and serious they looked. Thekmore, the Corvanian, businessman who had been leading the insults against Kevin, stepped forward. Commander, he said with a big smile, I think there must be some mistake. The only human in this salon is that one over there. He pointed at Kevin, who was still sitting quietly in his chair. And trust me, he's nobody important. Just another ordinary human trying to fit in with his betters. Commander Carter followed. Thekmore's pointing finger and her eyes landed on Kevin. For a moment, her face went completely white as if she had seen a ghost. Then her expression changed to one of shock and horror. Oh no, she whispered so quietly that only the people closest to her could hear. The two junior officers looked where their commander was looking, and their faces showed the same shock. The young man whose name tag read Lieutenant P. Johnson actually took a step backward. The young woman, Lieutenant A. Walsh, put her hand over her mouth in surprise. Commander Carter walked quickly through the crowd of aliens, who moved out of her way without thinking. When she reached Kevin's chair, she stopped and stood perfectly straight. Then, in front of everyone in the salon, she raised her right hand to her forehead in a perfect military salute. Ambassador Rivers, she said in a loud, clear voice that everyone in the salon could hear. Sir, the Galactic Council has been waiting for you in the main conference room. The peace negotiations between the Andromedans and the Centauri Alliance cannot begin without Earth's chief mediator. The silence in the salon was so complete that Kevin could hear the soft humming of the air recycling system. Every alien in the room stared at him with wide eyes and open mouths. The word ambassador seemed to hang in the air like a heavy weight. Kevin stood up slowly from his chair and straightened his simple clothes. Even with his hair looking terrible from the wrong treatment, he suddenly seemed different. The quiet dignity that the aliens had mistaken for weakness now looked like the calm confidence of someone who was used to handling very important situations. Thank you, Commander Carter, Kevin said softly. I'm sorry I'm late. I lost track of time. Commander Carter lowered her salute but continued to speak in a formal voice that everyone could hear. Sir, both the Andromedan fleet and the Centauri battle groups are waiting in neutral space. They've agreed to a ceasefire, but only because they knew you would be mediating the peace talks. Without you there, the shooting could start again at any moment. Lieutenant Johnson stepped forward and added, Ambassador, the Galactic Council members are very worried. They said this is the most important peace negotiation in 50 years. Both sides specifically requested you as the mediator because you're the only person they both trust. Lieutenant Walsh nodded and said, Sir, the council chairman asked me to tell you that the fate of 17 star systems depends on these talks. More than 40 billion people are counting on you to help end this war. Kevin nodded calmly, as if hearing about the fate of billions of people was normal for him. I understand. We should go immediately. But before Kevin could move toward the door, Commander Carter's voice became harder and more angry. She looked around the salon at all the aliens who had been laughing at Kevin just minutes before. I want to know something, she said in a voice that was both polite and threatening. Ambassador Rivers is known throughout the galaxy as the greatest peacemaker of our time. He has prevented more wars and saved more lives than any other diplomat in galactic history. So I'm very curious to know why he was sitting alone in the back corner of this salon, while everyone else was laughing and making jokes. Zexathala's crystal blue face turned almost white. Quindaros, who was still holding the wrong hair treatment in his 4 hands, began to shake. Thekmor's big smile disappeared completely, and he suddenly looked much smaller than before. There must be some misunderstanding, Zexthala said quickly. We had no idea who our client was. If you had known, you would have treated him with respect, Commander Carter finished for him. But you didn't know, so you treated him badly. That tells me everything I need to know about what kind of people you are. The other aliens in the salon began to realize what they had done. They had spent the last hour insulting and making fun of one of the most important humans in the galaxy. Some of them started to back away from Kevin's chair, as if they were afraid of getting in trouble. Lieutenant Johnson looked at the bottle Quindaros was holding and shook his head. Did you use Corvanian fur treatment on the ambassador's hair? He asked in disbelief. Quindaros could only nod, too scared to speak. That's going to take weeks to fix, Lieutenant Walsh said with anger in her voice. Kevin raised his hand to stop the conversation. It's all right, he said calmly. These things happen. We need to focus on the peace talks now. Everything else can wait. But Commander Carter was not ready to let it go. She looked directly at Thekmor, who had been the loudest in insulting. Kevin, you said that humans are primitive and unimportant, she said to the Corvanian. I wonder if you'll still feel that way when you learn exactly who you were talking to. Commander Carter pulled out a small device from her uniform pocket and activated it. A blue light appeared in the air above the device, showing a hologram that everyone in the salon could see clearly. The image showed Kevin standing between 2 groups of angry-looking aliens, his hands raised in a peaceful gesture. This picture was taken 15 years ago, Commander Carter said, her voice carrying to every corner of the salon. Ambassador Rivers was standing between the Hegemony war fleet and the Valorian Defense Force. Both sides had their weapons ready to fire. The war had already killed millions of people, and it was about to get much worse. The hologram changed to show newspaper headlines from across the galaxy. The words were written in many different alien languages, but they all said the same thing. Peace at last, and war ends, and the human who saved us all. Quindaros, the young Valorian stylist, stared at the headlines with his mouth open. His 4 hands were shaking as he realized what he was seeing. That's the end of the Hegemony War, he whispered. My grandfather fought in that war. He always said a human diplomat saved our people. Your grandfather was right, Lieutenant Johnson said. Ambassador Rivers spent 6 months talking to both sides. He worked 18 hours a day, never giving up, even when everyone else said peace was impossible. In the end, he found a solution that both sides could accept. Commander Carter touched the device again, and the hologram showed a different scene. This time it was Kevin sitting at a large table with dozens of different aliens. They were all signing papers and shaking hands or tentacles or whatever body parts their species used for agreements. The Corvanian trade crisis, Commander Carter announced. 28 years ago, the Corvanian homeworld was running out of food. Their crops had failed 3 years in a row, and millions of people were starving. Other species were afraid to help because the Corvanians had a reputation for being aggressive and difficult to work with. Thekmor's large brown eyes went wide. He knew this story very well because it was about his own people. His own family had been among those who were starving during those terrible years. Ambassador Rivers spent 2 years working on this problem, Lieutenant Walsh continued. He traveled to 47 different worlds talking to leaders and business owners. He convinced them that the Corvanians were not their enemies, just proud people who needed help. The trade agreements he created not only saved the Corvanian people, but made them one of the richest species in the galaxy. Thekmor's legs felt weak, and he had to sit down in the nearest chair. He remembered being a young Corvanian during the crisis, watching his parents worry about where their next meal would come from. The human standing in front of him had literally saved his life and the lives of everyone he loved. The hologram changed again, showing Kevin in a different setting. This time he was surrounded by Zephyrians, their crystal-like skin reflecting the light as they listened to him speak. "The Zephyrian Civil War," Commander Carter said, looking directly at Zexthala and the other Zephyrians in the salon. "Your people were divided into two groups that hated each other. The war had been going on for over a century. Millions of Zephyrians had died, and your beautiful homeworld was being destroyed by the fighting." Zexthala's crystal blue face turned even paler. Every Zephyrian knew about the Civil War. It was the darkest time in their people's history, when brother fought against brother and their civilization almost destroyed itself. "Ambassador Rivers lived on the Zephyrian homeworld for 3 years," Lieutenant Johnson explained. "He learned your language, studied your culture, and came to understand why your people were fighting. He didn't try to force a solution from the outside. Instead, he helped the Zephyrians find their own path to peace." "The Unity Accords," Zexthala whispered. "He created the Unity Accords that brought our people back together." "That's right," Commander Carter said. "And because of those accords, the Zephyrian people became united and strong again. Your homeworld was rebuilt, and now it's one of the most beautiful planets in the galaxy." The hologram showed many more scenes. Kevin talking to angry Altarian generals. Kevin sitting with Andromedan children in a refugee camp. Kevin walking through the ruins of destroyed cities while carrying medical supplies. "In 30 years of diplomatic service," Commander Carter said, "Ambassador Rivers has prevented 14 major wars, resolved 43 border disputes, and negotiated trade agreements that have brought peace and prosperity to hundreds of worlds. He has saved more lives than any soldier, doctor, or scientist in galactic history." An old Altarian woman who had been sitting quietly in the corner of the salon suddenly stood up. Her silver skin was wrinkled with age, and she walked slowly, but with dignity, toward Kevin. "Ambassador Rivers," she said in a shaky voice. 40 years ago, my son was captured during the Altarian border conflict. I was told he was dead. But you personally negotiated for the release of prisoners from both sides. My son came home because of you." Kevin smiled gently at the old woman. "I remember your son, Villandra. He's a doctor now, isn't he? Working on one of the frontier medical stations?" The old woman's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, he is. He named his daughter after you. Her name is Kevara, which means bringer of peace in our language." More aliens in the salon began to speak up. A young Corvanian male said, "My family owns a shipping business because of the trade routes you opened." A Valorian woman added, "My homeworld has clean water now because of the environmental treaty you negotiated." Even some of the salon staff had stories to tell. A Zephyrian hairstylist said, "My sister lives on a colony world that was saved from war because of your work." A Valorian manicurist added, "My cousin married someone from a different species because of the cultural exchange programs you created." Commander Carter let the stories continue for a few minutes, then activated her device again. This time the hologram showed a massive meeting hall filled with thousands of beings from every species in the galaxy. "Last year," she said, "the Galactic Council created a new award called the Peace Prize. It was designed to honor the person who had done the most to bring peace and understanding to the galaxy. Can anyone guess who won the first Peace Prize?" Everyone in the salon looked at Kevin, who was standing quietly and looking a bit embarrassed by all the attention. "Ambassador Rivers didn't just win the prize," Lieutenant Walsh said. "The vote was unanimous. Every single member of the Galactic Council voted for him. That had never happened before in the history of the Council." The hologram showed Kevin, standing in front of the Council, accepting a beautiful crystal award. But instead of keeping it for himself, the image showed him giving it to a group of young beings from different species. He gave the prize to a school, Lieutenant Johnson explained. "A school that teaches children from different worlds to understand and respect each other. He said that peace is not something one person can create alone. It's something that every generation has to learn and practice." Zexthala finally found his voice. We didn't know," he said weakly. "If we had known who he was." Kevin stepped forward and spoke for the first time since the truth had been revealed. "That's exactly the point," he said gently. "You didn't know who I was, so you judged me by how I looked and how much money you thought I had. But every person who walks through your doors has a story. Every person has value. Every person deserves to be treated with respect. He looked around the salon at all the aliens who had been laughing at him just an hour before. This is what I try to teach in my work. We are all different on the outside, but we all want the same basic things. We want to be safe, to be happy, and to be treated with dignity. When we remember that, peace becomes possible. The salon was completely quiet as Kevin's words sank in. Everyone was beginning to understand that they had not just insulted a famous person. They had learned something important about themselves and how they treated others. As word spread through the station's communication networks, more and more beings began arriving at Stellar Elegance. The salon, which had been busy before, was now completely packed with aliens of every species imaginable. They came from all over New Geneva Station, leaving their shops, offices, and restaurants to see the famous human peacemaker for themselves. A group of young Zephyrian students pushed through the crowd, their crystal-like skin glowing with excitement. "Ambassador Rivers," one of them called out, "we study your work in our Peace Studies class. Could you please sign our books?" Behind them came a family of Corvanians, including small children who hid shyly behind their parents' thick fur. The father, a merchant who worked in the station's market, bowed deeply to Kevin. "Sir, my grandfather fought in the Hegemony War. He told me stories about the human who ended the fighting. I never thought I would meet you." Kevin smiled warmly at the children and knelt down to their level. "What are your names?" he asked gently. The smallest Corvanian child, a little girl with bright brown eyes, whispered, "I'm Kessa." "My teacher said humans are scary, but you don't look scary." "I'm not scary at all," Kevin said with a laugh. "Would you like to know a secret? Sometimes I get scared too. Everyone gets scared sometimes, even grown-ups." The little girl giggled and reached out to touch Kevin's hand with her small furry paw. "Your skin is so smooth," she said with wonder. "It's like touching water." More families with children began to gather around Kevin. Parents wanted their young ones to meet the famous peacemaker, to remember this moment when they grew older. Kevin took time to speak with each child, asking their names and what they wanted to be when they grew up. An elderly Valorian male, walking slowly with the help of a cane, made his way through the crowd. His forearms were shaking with age, and his once golden skin had turned silver with the years. When he reached Kevin, tears began to flow down his wrinkled face. "Ambassador," the old Valorian said in a broken voice. 53 years ago, I was a soldier in the Valorian army. We were preparing to attack a human colony world. Our leaders told us that humans were dangerous and could not be trusted." Kevin listened carefully, giving the old man his full attention. "But then you came to our homeworld," the Valorian continued. "You spoke to our leaders, to our people, to anyone who would listen. You showed us that humans were not our enemies. Because of you, we never attacked that colony. Because of you, thousands of humans and Valorians did not die in a pointless war." The old man reached into his coat with one shaking hand and pulled out a small metal object. It was a medal, old and worn but still shining. "This is my military service medal," he said. "I want you to have it. It should belong to someone who truly served peace." Kevin gently pushed the medal back toward the old man. "Keep it," he said kindly. "You served your people with honor. That medal represents your courage and dedication. It belongs with you." A young Altarian woman stepped forward from the crowd. She was wearing the uniform of a space station security officer, and she looked nervous about speaking. "Ambassador Rivers," she said, "I need to tell you something. My name is Zara Lynn, and I work here on New Geneva Station. When I heard you were in the salon, I came as fast as I could." She paused and took a deep breath before continuing. 5 years ago, I was very angry and full of hate. My brother died in a border skirmish, and I blamed humans for his death. I wanted revenge. I was planning to join an extremist group that wanted to start a war between Altarians and humans. Kevin nodded, encouraging her to continue her story. "But then I watched a recording of one of your speeches," Zara Lynn said. "You were talking to families who had lost loved ones in wars. You said that hate only creates more hate, and that the best way to honor the dead is to make sure others don't have to die. Your words changed my heart." Instead of joining the extremists, I became a peace officer. Now I work to protect all species, including humans. More stories began to pour out from the crowd. A Corvanian engineer told how Kevin's trade agreements had allowed him to build schools on frontier worlds. A Zephyrian artist explained how Kevin's cultural exchange programs had inspired her greatest works. A Valorian doctor described how Kevin's medical treaties had helped her save lives during a plague outbreak. Commander Carter watched all of this with pride, but she also kept checking the time on her wrist device. Finally, she stepped forward and spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. "I'm sorry to interrupt," she said, "but we really do need to go. The peace negotiations cannot wait much longer." The crowd began to murmur with disappointment. They had hoped to spend more time with the famous ambassador. But Kevin raised his hand for quiet, and everyone fell silent immediately. "Before we go," Kevin said, "I want to share something with all of you. Something important about humanity and what makes us special in this galaxy." He looked around at all the different faces watching him. Zephyrians with their crystal skin, Valorians with their forearms, Corvanians with their thick fur, Altarians with their silver features, and many other species he had worked with over the years. "Many of you have thanked me today for the peace work I do," Kevin continued. "But I want you to understand something. I am not special because I am human. I am not smarter or stronger or more gifted than any of you. What makes humans different is not that we are better than other species. What makes us different is how we see the galaxy." The crowd leaned closer, eager to hear what he would say next. "When humans look at the universe," Kevin explained, "we don't see enemies or competitors or threats. We see potential friends. We see beings with their own hopes and dreams and fears. We see people who want the same things we want, safety for their families, prosperity for their worlds, and a chance to live in peace." A young Zephyrian in the crowd called out, "But how do you always know what to say to end conflicts? How do you find solutions when everyone else has given up?" Kevin smiled at the question. "The secret is very simple," he said. "We listen. Really listen. Not to find weakness or to prove we are right, but to understand what the other person truly needs. When you understand what someone fears, what they hope for, what they love most in the universe, then you can find a way to help them feel safe and respected." He gestured to the diverse crowd around him. "Look at all of you here together. Zephyrians and Valorians, Corvanians and Altarians, dozens of different species standing side by side in peace. This is what the galaxy can be like when we choose understanding over fear, when we choose cooperation over competition." An old Corvanian male with gray fur spoke up from the back of the crowd. "Ambassador, what advice would you give to young beings who want to make the galaxy more peaceful?" "Start small," Kevin replied immediately. "Be kind to the person next to you. Listen to someone who is different from you. Help someone who needs it, even if they can't help you back. Peace is not built by grand gestures or famous speeches. Peace is built by millions of small acts of kindness and understanding, one person at a time." The crowd was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. Then slowly, they began to applaud. The sound started quietly but grew louder and louder until the entire salon was filled with the clapping, clicking, whistling, and humming sounds that different species used to show appreciation. Kevin bowed respectfully to the crowd, then turned to Commander Carter. "Now," he said with a gentle smile, "let's go save a few more lives." As Kevin prepared to leave with Commander Carter and her officers, something remarkable began to happen in the salon. The crowd of beings who had gathered to see him started to move apart, creating a clear path from his chair to the main entrance. Without anyone giving orders or making announcements, every alien in the room stood perfectly still and quiet. The silence was deep and respectful, unlike the cruel laughter that had filled the same space just hours before. Zephyrians with their crystal-like skin stood next to Valorians with their forearms. Corvanian families held their children close while elderly Altarians bowed their silver heads. Even the youngest beings seemed to understand that they were witnessing something special. Kevin walked slowly through the path the crowd had made for him. He stopped every few steps to shake hands, touch shoulders, or speak quietly to someone who caught his eye. His movements were gentle and unhurried, as if he had all the time in the world instead of being late for one of the most important peace negotiations in galactic history. When Kevin reached Quindaros, the young Valorian stylist who had used the wrong hair treatment, he stopped and looked into the alien's 4 frightened eyes. Quindaros was shaking with fear, expecting to be punished or reported to his supervisors. "Thank you for your service today," Kevin said simply, extending his hand for Quindaros to shake. The young Valorian stared at Kevin's hand in amazement. But I ruined your hair," he stammered. "I used the wrong treatment on purpose because I thought you weren't important." "Everyone makes mistakes," Kevin replied calmly. "What matters is what we learn from them. I hope today taught you something valuable about judging people before you know them." Quindaros reached out with one of his 4 hands and shook Kevin's hand gently. "It did, sir. It really did. I promise I will never treat anyone badly again, no matter who they are or what they look like." Kevin smiled and patted the young alien's shoulder before moving on. Next, he came to Zexathala, the salon manager who had put Kevin in the worst chair and encouraged his staff to give poor service. Zexathala's crystal blue face was pale with shame, and he could barely look Kevin in the eyes. "Ambassador Rivers," Zexathala said in a voice so quiet it was almost a whisper, "please accept my deepest apologies. We would be honored to provide all of our services to you free of charge for the rest of your life. It's the least we can do, after treating you so terribly." Kevin shook his head gently. "That's very kind of you, but I can't accept that offer. Everyone deserves to be paid fairly for their work, whether they're cutting hair or negotiating peace treaties. Good work should always be rewarded, just as all people should always be treated with respect." He reached into his jacket and pulled out his credit card, the same one he had shown when he first arrived. "I'd like to pay the full price for the services I received today, and I'd like to leave a tip for Quindaros. He's young and still learning, but I believe he'll become an excellent stylist if he's given the chance." Zexathala stared at the credit card as if it were made of pure gold. "Sir, after everything we did, you're still going to pay us?" "Of course," Kevin said simply. "A deal is a deal. I came here for a haircut, and I received one. The fact that it didn't turn out perfectly doesn't change our agreement." The salon manager took the card with trembling hands and processed the payment. As he handed it back to Kevin, he said, "Sir, I promise you that stellar elegance will never again judge a client by their appearance. We will treat every person who walks through our doors with the same respect we would show to you." "Don't do it for me," Kevin replied. "Do it because it's the right thing to do." As Kevin continued toward the door, he came to Thekmor, the large Corvanian businessman who had led much of the cruel laughter earlier. Thekmor was no longer the proud, arrogant alien who had mocked human civilization. Instead, he looked smaller and ashamed, his thick brown fur seeming to droop with sadness. "Ambassador Rivers," Thekmor said, his deep voice cracking with emotion. "I said terrible things about you and your people. I called humans primitive and unimportant. But you saved my entire species. My children are alive today because of the work you did during the trade crisis." Kevin stopped and looked up at the much taller alien. "Your words hurt," he admitted honestly. "But I understand why you said them. Many beings in the galaxy have learned to judge others quickly as a way to protect themselves. It's a survival instinct that made sense when your ancestors lived in dangerous times." Thekmor's small black eyes filled with tears. "But we're not in dangerous times anymore. We should be better than that." "Yes," Kevin agreed. "We should be. And now you have the chance to be better. You can use your influence as a successful businessman to help other people see past their first impressions. You can teach your children to treat all beings with kindness. That would be a gift to the entire galaxy." Thekmor reached into his expensive suit and pulled out a small device. He touched a few buttons and then showed the screen to Kevin. "I just transferred 1 million credits to the Human Children's Education Fund," he said. "It's not enough to make up for what I said, but it's a start." Kevin smiled warmly. "That's very generous, but you didn't need to do that to earn my forgiveness. You already had it the moment you realized you were wrong." As Kevin finally reached the main entrance, he turned back to look at the Salon one last time. Hundreds of beings from dozens of different species were watching him, their faces showing a mixture of respect, admiration, and newfound understanding. "Remember," Kevin called out to the crowd, "peace begins with how we treat the person standing next to us. Every day, each of you has the power to make the galaxy a little bit kinder, a little bit safer, and a little bit more welcoming for everyone." With all those words, Kevin walked through the glass doors and into the corridor, followed by Commander Carter and her officers. The crowd remained standing in respectful silence until he was completely out of sight. In the hours that followed, news of what had happened at Stellar Elegance spread throughout New Geneva Station, and then to other worlds across the galaxy. The story was told and retold, growing with each telling but always maintaining its central message about the importance of treating all beings with dignity and respect. Quindaris kept his promise and became known as one of the kindest stylists in the sector, always taking extra time to make sure every client felt welcome and valued. Zexathala changed the policies at Stellar Elegance, training his staff to treat every customer equally regardless of their species, appearance, or apparent wealth. Thekmore used his business connections to create new trade opportunities between different species, always remembering Kevin's words about cooperation and understanding. He also established scholarships for young beings from different worlds to study together and learn about each other's cultures. Meanwhile, Kevin successfully mediated the peace negotiations between the Andromedans and the Centauri Alliance. The Uwain treaty they signed became known as the New Geneva Accords, preventing a war that could have destroyed 17 star systems and cost billions of lives. But perhaps most importantly, the story of what happened in the Salon became a legend that was told to children across the galaxy. It reminded everyone that heroes don't always look like what we expect them to look like, and that the most powerful weapon against hatred and prejudice is simple human kindness. Years later, when beings from different worlds met for the first time, they would often remember the story of the humble human who changed hearts and minds not through force or threats, but through patience, understanding, and the quiet strength that comes from always choosing to do what is right. And in a small corner of a luxury salon on a space station far from Earth, a simple chair became a monument to the idea that every person, no matter how ordinary they might seem, deserves to be treated with respect and dignity. It was a lesson that the galaxy would never forget.